SABC News presentation.
Access to information and communication technology, ICTs, is central to the right to information and the right to communicate. Being able to receive and disseminate information is fundamental to advancing democracy. It is also crucial for economic participation by all. But social justice activists say majority of South Africans are marginalized by the lack of access to ICTs. Welcome to Interface. I am Rams Mabote. Before we get into our discussion, let's have a look at this insert produced by Rosalia Whitehead.
The right to communicate is a fundamental right enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. This right can be interpreted to mean not only the right to speak and to be heard, but also the right to access the means to speak and to be heard. According to the Human Sciences Research Council, most developed economies have very good information and communications technologies or ICT infrastructure. Without a good ICT infrastructure, rural areas would not be able to contribute to the economy and develop. ICTs are important in that they keep people informed about issues such as how to withdraw money safely from the bank, where to find a job, or even finding a school for your child. The city of Tshwane believes that ICT connectivity is just as important as other services.
We're investing in other services, building of roads, houses, providing water, electricity, sanitation. 4.2 billion rands of our budget is directed there, only 150 to free Wi-Fi. We've got a wonderful partnership with Project Decision, a not-for-profit organization that has come on board helping us to roll out the free Wi-Fi.
But a survey conducted from 2003 to 2009 by the South African Social Attitudes found that rural areas lag behind in access to ICT, an indication that the ICT infrastructure was not complete and had not reached everyone. In 2012, only 24% of households in urban areas and 5.8% of households in rural areas had a working fixed line. Over 42% did not have fixed lines and over 51% could not afford one. In 2013, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa instructed mobile service providers to cut the rates they charge consumers when they terminate contracts. This has made cell phone charges cheaper, but the cost of making calls and using data are still expensive. With the digital divide visible in South Africa, government established the National Broadband Plan. One of its key pillars is to increase the number of Wi-Fi hotspots across the country so that everyone is connected by 2020. One beneficiary of the free Wi-Fi is Prospectus Novus School. Located in Pretoria North, this school offers education to learners with specific learning disabilities.
When I was a child, you had to go to a library and get something from a book. Many times when those books appear, they're out of date already. And technology and everything is progressing at such a state that what is new and what's applicable today is not tomorrow.
Grade 8 learner Kamogela Monyeki says he couldn't finish his homework.
When I don't understand, I go up there and then I go on my phone and research about the part that I do not understand. And then I get it, and then I understand it.
Indeed, Kamogela has seen a general improvement in his marks in subjects such as English and science. The Institute of Race Relations says South Africa's expensive and slow internet is holding back the country's economic growth prospects and democratic freedoms. It says countries that are able to secure their citizens the freedom to circulate ideas are generally freer societies, more stable and more prosperous democracies. Rosalia Whitehead, Interface, Johannesburg.
As usual, you may join this conversation. Comment on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC, or tweet at Interface on SABC, or indeed to myself at Rams by the Horns. Let's welcome our guests. Pandelani Munyai is the Chief Technology Officer at the State Information Technology Agency, SITA, and Mark Weinberg, the National Organizer to the Right to Know campaign. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us. Pandelani, I'm going to start with you.
Good evening.
How are we doing generally in delivering this right to information?
Yes, actually, up to so far, as you know, we do have a policy from government point of view that is called the SA Connect, which explains as to what is it that needs to be done in order to connect schools, clinics, public places where citizens can have access to. So up to so far now, we are trying by all means to make sure that we implement those policies to make sure that all citizens have access.
Can I ask my question again?
Yes.
How are we doing? I hear that we've got the policy, but how are we doing so far in terms of delivery, and whose responsibility is it?
So there are different departments that are responsible for making sure that we deliver, more especially when it comes to connecting schools. So up to so far, in terms of the actual percentages, I don't have the actual numbers here, but all I can tell you now is the first phase that we're working on, more especially from SITA point of view, is to make government to work again. So your question is, how are we doing? We are now connecting all government departments at a high broadband speed.
Mark, I know that you guys disagree. I know that the Right to Know campaign says we're not doing too well.
Yeah, I think as a country we should be very frustrated with the slow pace of the rollout of internet access. The government's policy is at least 12 months behind. They said they would have connected at least half of all government buildings, schools, clinics by the end of this year. We're nowhere near that. They said that I think 50% by the end of 2016 would all be connected to the internet at a very slow rate of an average of 5 megabytes per second. But most rural South Africans have very limited internet, and most South Africans, in fact, are dependent on the duopoly of MTN and Vodacom for access to the mobile internet.
And in your view, where's the bottleneck?
I think it's at a number of levels, but it must start at cabinet and at national policy. Since the mid-90s, we've basically handed over the provision of this basic service to the private sector. And that's resulted in these massive corporations behaving like monopolies, giving us amongst the highest prices on the continent, and also going to where the money is. So if you live in a suburb in Johannesburg, you could have high-speed fiber, the best that you can find in America, but a few kilometers down the road or just outside the city, you've got a very poor mobile connection with a 2G or 3G and very expensive internet. It's just not good enough. Everyone should have access to broadband.
But I need to ask you about the difference between who should do between the private sector and public sector, but I need to take a break. When we come back, I'll talk to that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we speak more to our guests. Welcome back. You are watching Interface on SABC. We are in conversation with Pandelani Munyai, who is Chief Technology Officer at the State Information Technology Agency, SITA, and Mike Weinberg, the National Organizer to the Right to Know campaign. As usual, you may join this conversation, comment on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC, or tweet Interface on SABC or REMS by the horns. Pandelani, Mark speaks about the duopoly of these two service providers. You know, I get confused. One moment in this country, you'll hear people say privatize the public sector. You know, take away the SABC, take away SAA, give it to the private sector. Well, when we have private sector, Mark says, well, they're also, monopolizing and we're not getting the services to the right people. Mm-hmm. At which point do we do what and who should do what? I'm still confused.
Yeah, we should do what? Up to so far, I mean, you are very much aware that if you look at the well-to-do cities, like you look at the center and Bedfordview, Johannesburg, all over, you will see that most of these big companies, the private sectors, they want to be there. And why? Because there's money. But now, the question that we're talking about, and from the insight that you gave earlier on, we're talking about rural communities. Mm-hmm. If I were to say to these big companies, please go there in the outskirts, rural areas, build fibers there to connect the communities, will they do it? No, they can't do it because...
And if they don't, who's going to do it?
That is where government comes in now. So to answer your question in terms of who should do it, I think according to us, it should be a partnership between us, private sector and the public sector.
You see, one of the problems is that the main public sector utility, Telkom, who in our opinion should be doing this. In our opinion, this is very similar to water or roads. It's a basic utility that the government needs to provide to enable the economy and enable the democracy. It should be provided by a non-profit public institute. Unfortunately, we've got Telkom, which has also been privatized, partially privatized, corporatized, but they have to make a profit. So in the early 90s, mid-90s, just after 94, Telkom spent a lot of money putting telephones out to areas that never had telephones before. An amazing success story, built on a public utility model. But 4 years later, they were told they have to make a profit now. Shares were sold, and what happened? They started doing cost recovery on those lines. So all these people that got phones used them for 1 or 2 months, and then they got cut off for non-payment. We're saying broadband has to be free. There has to be a free basic service provided by a non-profit state utility.
Let's for now leave the politics of ownership, because we probably will get derailed. If ICTs reached everyone, or at least most of the people, what difference would it make, Mark?
In a democracy, we work on the assumption that we can elect our leaders based on making an informed choice. So the first thing is to become informed as citizens. Without getting into the debate about media transformation in the country, I think it's fair to say that most people in South Africa don't have enough information about what goes on in the country to make informed decisions. So for democracy, access to information is critical. People are also frustrated. We see the service delivery protests and so on. People don't have a voice. The beauty of the internet is very low entry levels to creating a blog, a podcast, what have you. People can access information and have freedom of expression.
How does it work for a kid in Madibogo, 100 kilometers outside Mafikeng, who is, or let's say a granny, who's completely illiterate, and they have access to all these wonderful gadgets?
Let's say a kid, because children adopt to technology so fast. The beauty of the internet, especially when we start to talk broadband, because then we're talking high speeds that can carry audio and video. We're no longer having literacy as a barrier to information. In the village, with a phone on a camera, people can record their own information and put it up on their blogs, on their Facebook pages, download each other's information. A child in a village could have access to any university in the world. Most universities are running free online courses now. So there really are no limits.
But again, if they were illiterate, that access to information that they couldn't understand, how would it work?
Well, I'm saying firstly, high-speed internet allows communication in audio and video. That overcomes illiteracy. But also, I mean, I've got young children
Mark,
on my
if
own.
they can't understand English like you and I, how is it going to help?
A big part of the South African Broadband Connect policy is about what mechanisms do we put in place to stimulate local content. Because there's no reason why rural people in the Eastern Cape can't start producing their own content and sharing it across the Eastern Cape and across South Africa and beyond. But more to the point, I think when people access and start to experience the potential of this technology, it acts as an incentive to learn to read, to learn to engage in different languages.
And what about competing needs like education, jobs, food? What do we put first?
The first point to make is that South Africa is really a middle-income country. We've got immense human wealth and mineral wealth. We've got a problem of underinvestment, which means we've got too much money floating around. So I think to say we have to make the choices is really a bit of political sleight of hand. But if we did have to, I think there's a strong argument to say, let's put information and communication first, because it's the basis of democracy, it's the basis of economy, and it will unlock our human potential, which will then be critical to resolving other political questions around health, housing, and jobs.
Pandelani, I hear what Mark is saying. I checked the insight done by Rosalia earlier. And then I also hear that, you know, the department takes money back to Treasury in the region of billions of rands. That cannot be right when we have all these challenges.
Look, I mean, while I cannot answer on behalf of the department, but suffice to say that up to so far, indeed, if money can be made available to connect those public services, to connect the rural areas that he's talking about, I think there can be huge benefits for those people residing in rural areas.
Okay, I asked him where the bottlenecks are. In your view, where are the bottlenecks?
Yes, up to so far, in my view, the bottlenecks up to so far is in terms of the prioritizing the funding. So if we can prioritize funding as a country and say we want to take ICT seriously, we want to make sure that we deploy and we prioritize the deployment in rural areas, I think that is where we can unlock the bottlenecks.
I want us to look at painting the future, maybe the ideal world. I want us to look at what if we did the right things and how the world would look like, but who needs to be doing the right thing. So for now, think about it. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to deal with the future and come back and complete this conversation. Welcome back. You are watching Interface on SABC. We are in conversation with Pandelani Munyai, who is Chief Technology Officer at the State Information Technology Agency, SITA. Mark Weinbeck, the National Organizer for the Right to Know campaign. As usual, you may join this conversation. Comment on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC, or tweet at Interface on SABC or at Rams by the Horns. Pandelani, let's paint a future perfect.
Okay.
If we got the money, we now have the policies. If we got the capacity, what should we look like in the next 5 years? 2020, Vision 2020. You know, we always speak about these wonderful terms in South Africa.
Yes. Vision 2020, what we should be looking like now is if we have all this broadband connectivity that we've been talking about, we've got all children having access to the internet, having access to online services, what's going to happen there is you'll find a situation where there will be a lot of creativity and innovation. Like, for example, if you look at countries like China, you'll see that you are going to stimulate lots and lots of economic growth where people are going to have access to information online without having to bother, government employees to ask for certain things that they can get themselves online. So Vision 2020 is to make sure that employees and citizens should be able to be more creative, and then they mustn't depend on the state or anyone else for them to do something. So they have to do it by themselves.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think as usual in South Africa, we have a broad vision that we all agree on. Our Vision 2020 says everyone has high-speed access to the internet. The one problem is that, is it access or is it service? We want universal service, which means not only the internet's there, but I can't afford to use it. So we have to look at the question of a free basic provision. That said, I think it's, for us sitting today in 2015, it's almost impossible to imagine what that future looks like, where all South Africans can access information and communicate with one another, the impact it can have on our economy, on local economic development, but more importantly on democracy, on active citizens, on well-informed, well-rounded human beings.
How do we then compare ourselves to other countries in the continent? In fact, I'd like to look at Nigeria, especially the backdrop of what just happened with service provider that we share here.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that, you know, the proliferation of information technology systems is far wider in Nigeria than we find it here.
Yeah, I don't have the Nigerian case study at hand. I mean, South Africa, one of our former presidents said it's two countries. So you find in our urban areas, we have world-class access to media and access to the internet. Very different when you get out of the cities.
Well, I'm glad you've said that about two countries. And I wanted to ask this question. Is this not a luxury, this ICTs? Is it not a middle-class issue, a luxury of the rich and the comfortable, when people need other stuff? There are still no roads in
the inserters argued that we're talking here about a basic right, the right to communicate. I don't think you would sit there and ask, is water a luxury? Just because cities have got well-maintained water systems, rural people are walking down to the river, peri-urban people are using a communal tap. I think we have a vision that says everyone must have access to safe, clean water, and it would be absurd to suggest that that were a middle-class issue. It's about citizenship, and it's about being human in the end of the day.
Pandelani, do we have at SITA the right personnel, both in terms of qualifications and numbers, to get us to that vision?
That's a difficult question. Yeah, we do. And if we were to compare ourselves with those first world-class countries that we spoke about, we are no way closer to them.
I want us to compare ourselves to the other countries in this continent. You know, our countries at the same economic level.
Yes.
I don't want us to pin some...
But you see, what we are doing up to so far now is we are looking at countries that are doing so well when it comes to these issues that we're talking about of broadband connectivities and e-government services that we're talking about. So what we've done as SETA is we've benchmarked ourselves with the #1 country in the world. You know, we are not benchmarking ourselves at a lower level. We are really going so high to see. If we look at a country like South Korea, which is the #1 in the world in terms of all these broadband and e-government services that achieves everything exactly that Mark is talking about. So we then benchmarked ourselves as SETA and as South Africa to say, are we really closer to them? And if we were to look at that yardstick, I would say, no, we are not. We cannot compare ourselves with those countries. But if I'm comparing ourselves with other African countries, I would say, yes, we are very much comparable. Yes.
And if, again, pardon my obsession about this Madiboho place. If I look at the situation in this country, people are going to go, it's end of the year now, people are taking holidays and typical migrant work, and we still have them, lots of them in this country, who would have wired money back home using ICTs. They would then have to take transport, spend more money to do that. My worry about this particular person I'm talking about is that, are they going to do this again in 5 years?
In terms of skills?
In terms of being able to wire money rather than taking money in their pocket and getting into a taxi and travel 300 kilometers to go and deliver Christmas goodies.
No, there are. I mean, look, up to so far, I mean, check. For, if you were to look at the population, starting from maybe the youth, up to so far, you will see, for example, how many people now are doing online banking up to so far. So this thing is a trend.
I doubt it's happening in Madiboho.
It will happen. It will happen. The only challenge that we talk about is it won't happen up to so far if we are not taking the issue of ICT and if we are not providing broadband connectivity, because once you have broadband connectivity to those areas, it becomes compulsory. And you will see that in terms of training, in terms of changing the mindset, everybody will have access to knowledge. They will learn how to do banking online. They will understand the benefits. But up to so far, we are talking about pie in the sky because they haven't seen it. It is not there. It's non-existent.
Beyond online banking.
And we're running out of time, but quickly.
Imagine a future where children growing up without their fathers in the Eastern Cape have got access to Skype. And on the mines of Marikana, they've got access to Skype, and your father is a presence in your life. I think that's the vision of what broadband can mean to ordinary people, including rural.
And that should be and can be reached, can it?
It can.
You and me have already got Skype. There's no reason why fellow South Africans don't have it. It's a policy question and it's an economic question that our government hasn't managed to take by the horns.
And all things equal, all those people we spoke about should be watching this program on their phones, not even having a need to be next to a television.
Or having so many more choices on a YouTube platform that they might never watch your program.
Mark Weinberg, thank you very much for your time. Pandelani, thank you. We're looking forward to 2020, and I hope you can deliver on that.
I'll come back again.
Thank you very much, and that's how we end our program tonight. From me, Rems Mabote, and the team, goodbye and good luck.